Welcome to the Seriously It's Not Therapy podcast, where we take turns to ask each other very purposeful and quite deep questions that are completely unscripted. Just yesterday, actually, I heard someone say something that plays really well into what I thought we'd talk about today. But before we do that, welcome, Tanya.
Great to see you, Brenda. Always good to see
Likewise.
you. Now, before you jump in and ask me whatever you're going to ask me, I just want to give you a quick update. Two things. First one, I was chatting with a beautiful mutual friend of ours on a long drive home the other day, and she was sharing with me that she'd listened to our podcast and in particular taken on board what we'd spoken about with being really clear about what you want to manifest. And she'd
Right.
realised that she needed to be a lot clearer in terms of the specific things she was wanting to manifest. So she got really clear on that and manifested the outcome she wanted so super fast, like ridiculously fast. Like so fast that she was a bit like, oh, that's just happened. So I thought I'll share that with you and I'll let you know offline, who that was. I haven't spoken to her about sharing it on the podcast, so I don't want to mention her name. But I was just chuffed, so chuffed hearing that. And the other thing I wanted to update you on is, how we said we were going to hold each other accountable.
Yes.
And I'd said that I was going to work on doing those visualizations, seeing myself do those things that I know I'm not naturally good at in terms of, the new aspect of the business, the networking, the selling, blah, 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 blah. And so I jumped on ChatGPT. I've put a framework together. So I'm going to share that on Instagram. I'll share that document that I put together. It's a really, really great document. But the other thing that I did is I started listening to Daniel Pink's book called To Sell is Human, which for people that are natural sellers, natural networkers, the book's not for you, but it's for people that resist. So for someone like you, Brenda, you don't need to read the book. But for anyone that can relate to what I shared, where, you feel uncomfortable putting yourself out there selling or networking or, those sorts of things, I found the book phenomenal. The first two chapters I skipped over. It was boring as batshit. I needed to get into, the real meat of it. And once I got into those chapters, I started realizing I do these things already. Or actually, I can do those things. Why am I resisting? And it was so much about my mindset that I feel like my mindset is already shifting. So knowing that these things that I'm planning to do are going to actually be a lot easier than I'd anticipated and expected. I'm actually, I can't believe I'm saying this, looking forward to it. There you go.
We know that will help. It's that feeling of experiencing what it is you want to manifest. Now, I've had a really interesting time too. I did I did some writing. I made I wouldn't call it a list, but I did some lovely writing about the beautiful nature of who I'd love to attract. But the interesting thing for me, the really interesting thing that I am super aware of is that I don't necessarily want this. Okay, so it's not pushing it away. It's just I have a really simple life. So I've had a few neat conversations with friends this week because I'm very aware that what we're thinking and what we're speaking supports what we're manifesting as much as process. And the conversation I had was around, I have this beautiful, simple life. And I know that I'll know it's the right person when my life stays simple because I have never experienced that. And so that took a bit of pressure off. But I'm coming and going. I'm certainly looking at that and listening to some beautiful music and visualizing and feeling. And I get the giggles when I do it because I think, it'll just be so hilarious when this happens.
Nice. No.
But I'm going to add that to my specifics, just, leaning into what you said about your friend and the clarity. I'm going to just add a little something in there around, I have this beautiful, simple life and it's going to stay simple when the right person comes to join me. So it's
And that's,
interesting. It's
yeah,
fun.
but that's really great clarity as well. But it's
Mm,
also identifying, your trigger and where your resistance was, because you don't want
yeah.
that beautiful, simple life to change. So that's fantastic. And again, it's about that clarity. I love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
it really
Bring him
is. It
on.
really is. So watch this space, people. We will continue to keep you up to date on how we are going. Um, and just getting back to this week, what I heard someone say that I thought really supported what I wanted to talk about, and it made me stop and think. And I'm still not sure that I've processed what she said, but what she said was, we humans, we can cope with change, especially when we
Mm-hmm.
have to, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't like living in uncertainty. And I found that really interesting because in this episode, my darling friend, I want to I want to dive into your decades of astrological learnings and insight and really unpack what I think is quite a provocative question. And that is, does astrology, so specifically astrology, does astrology actually offer us some certainty or just soothe our craving for it? And I want to say that again because I think I've had the question in my head, but you're hearing it for the first time. So, does
Mm-hmm.
astrology actually offer certainty or just soothe our craving for it? Because we've done a lot of coaching in our years, and we've worked with many people, and that concept of locus of control. So I just wanted to get that really age old but
Mm-hmm.
trustworthy, comment in there, the locus of control, where we encourage our clients to look within, to really trust their own insight, to make choices from that place, that inner authority, rather than
Mm-hmm.
relying too heavily on external answers. And we've both noticed in our own lives and the people we work with, just how uncomfortable that uncertainty makes us. I mean, we've had many, many conversations, and it's not just mindset, it's
Mm-hmm.
biological. It's the mind body connection. The body tells us so much, as you know. So whether you are maybe unsure if a relationship will last, or you're waiting for a job offer, waiting for medical test results can be a tough one. Your body doesn't just sit there quietly. It gives you a response, and it might be a sweaty palms or increased heart rate. Sick tummy is my one, or tight chest. And it's because we're wired to want to be able to predict what's coming next. It's how we say safe. And just a tiny bit before I get into, the first real question for you is, when we can't have that prediction, when we don't feel safe or things feel unclear or unpredictable, our amygdala fires up. So that stress center of the brain, it's part of our limbic brain that fires off our fight flight response. And it feels out of our control. We feel it in our body. Um, but the fascinating piece, and I think the real piece that made me want to talk about this with you, is that our brain doesn't always know the difference between a real threat or an imagined threat. So your
Mm-hmm.
body will respond exactly the same way, whether it's real or whether it's just something that you're fearful of, imagining, whatever. So, with that
Mm-hmm.
really long intro, it's
Which
time
has
for
given me
Tanya to
time to
speak.
think. Yes.
Yeah, because I'm going to ask you my
Mm,
first question, and it is on this topic that you bring so much depth to, which is astrology.
mm,
And what I wanted to ask you to get the ball rolling on this conversation is, why do you think astrology gives people such a strong sense of certainty? Is it real? Is it imagined? Does it even matter? So, why do you think it is that we get that feeling when we
mm,
learn what's going on?
mm. And that's a really great question. And you're absolutely right. Like, our brains are prediction machines. So our
Mm,
brain wants to know what's happening. Our brains crave certainty. And like you said, from a neuroscience perspective, our brains hate ambiguity, uncertainty, because, like you said, it brings up that fight or flight response and the
Mm.
amygdala fires off. And that's quite often when people come to me for readings, because that's exactly what they're experiencing. Whether
Mm.
it's, like you said, a relationship issue, something going on at work, something going on with family, something that's, personal, that's when they come for a reading. And what they're wanting from that reading is going to depend, again, on their mindset and how open they are to hearing what I share with them. Because with astrology, nothing's certain. In life, nothing is certain.
Mm.
And so what I can do, though, is I can look at someone's chart and I can see exactly what the planets are doing, and I'll explain to them this and this and this and this and this and this is what's going on. And they're like, yes, that is
Mm.
exactly what's going on.
Mm.
And then I will talk through, well, this is what's going on, but this is why it's happening. And then on the flip side, you can either surrender to those energies or you can choose to take control and work with those energies. And so that's where astrology becomes really, really powerful, because it's about tuning into the rhythm of what's going on in your chart.
Okay.
And it's about asking, what, for example, is this transit asking of me? What does this transit actually want me to do? What am I seeking here? What could the outcome potentially be if I work with these energies? And some of these energies are potentially stressful. Some of them are really fantastic. And it's the people that use astrology as a tool to build success that are going to get the most out of it. So if you come to me for a reading and you just want to understand this is why X, Y, and Z is going on, and I can blame it on astrology, but I have no accountability, there's no skin in the game. I just want something to blame, then you're not working with the energies, you're letting those energies take control of you. You're not stepping into your power.
And
And
I'm
I
kind of
think,
hearing that right the way through too, with you saying things like you can either surrender to it or take control and work with the energies. You are encouraging either way that
mm,
the person is taking their choice, some action, some form of action.
absolutely, because in your chart, it's got a really clear, let's call it a recipe, right, for your
Oh,
personal
I like
success.
that.
So your chart tells you, like, if we talk about, Mercury, for instance, when you're in your flow and you are communicating at optimum levels, this is how you do it. If you want to really stand in your power and be true to you and feel that true essence of who you are, this is where the energy of your sun comes into play, because that's when you feel like you. If you want to feel emotionally connected, emotionally supported, it's understanding your moon and what your moon needs emotionally. Your rising sign, it's like your PR, it's the marketing, this is how the world sees you, which can quite often be very different from your sun sign. So your sun
So
sign is how you, yeah.
by rising, do you mean like I'm a Capricorn? Is that rising?
No, so you're Capricorn sun, but in your chart,
Sun.
you're, from memory, you're Libra rising, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Got it.
Libra rising sign. So that's how people perceive you. And so that's the energy that you're giving off. And so it's
Ah.
understanding that my rising sign, this is like my branding, my marketing, this is how people perceive me. They may not, and they always don't need to know your sun sign and the depth and what drives you from that perspective, but you need to know, and you need to know the difference. So when you understand the transits that are hitting on your chart, and they're just a couple of examples in your chart, you know how to leverage them. And Jupiter is the biggest one, right?
Mm.
Because when you have a Jupiter transit, Jupiter is about growth, it's about opportunities, it's about luck, but it's very specific to each person, depending on what sign Jupiter is in your chart and then which house it's in. It's going to tell you this is where the luck comes for you. And so when you have transits hitting on your natal Jupiter, you need to know how to work it. Because when you get great Jupiter transit, life feels great. We tend to socialize more. We spend more money. We're just having a really great time. And then the transit's been and gone. And what have we got out of it? Nothing. So I
Yeah.
always encourage people, and it's always specific to someone's chart. This is what you need to leverage. You're going to feel really good in this transit, but please remember that I've told you that if you're going to network, make it business or make it this or make it that, like really work the energies and leverage them, because that's going to drive the outcome for you. And this is where I come back to what you were talking about with, is there certainty in
Mm.
astrology? It's what we make of it. So we can let the energies wash over us. We can be absorbed. It's like, swimming in the ocean. We can get, the waves can sweep over us. We can feel like we're drowning, or we can learn how to work with the waves and have a great
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even in the really stressful transits, because throughout our life, we have some really stressful transits, right? We have Saturn return, we have a Chiron return, oh God, which can be horrendous. And then, when we're in our 40s, we have these like midlife crisis transits, and everyone experiences them. But knowing that you're going to experience them, knowing that that's a certainty, because everyone is going to have those specific transits, right? How am I going to work with it? How am I going to learn from this? How am I going to grow from this? How am I going to get the best out of it? Even if it's a really stressful transit, there's going to be a learning in there for me. And particularly with a planet like Saturn, Saturn can beat us around the head. It can be really, really tough. But if we know our Saturn lessons, we can work with it. So let me give you an example, right? My Saturn is in the sign of Gemini and expressed through the third house, which is Gemini again. So it's all about, for me, learning, communication, all those types of themes. Interestingly, like it won't be any surprise that I grew up on the stage acting, communicating. I studied journalism at university, no surprises there. But I got run over by a truck when I was 20 and I had a head injury. And because of that
Wow.
head injury, I've lost a lot of my long-term memory. So a lot of things from my childhood I don't remember, but I instantly lost my short-term memory. So really tough Saturn lesson, right? Because I had to retrain my brain to get my memory back. So to give you an example of how horrendous it is to lose your short-term memory, you leave the house and don't remember to take your keys. So you're constantly locking
Oh.
yourself out of the house, like really annoying things like that, because you don't have that short-term memory. People would share things with me, I wouldn't remember. So I would have to write everything down. So to retrain my brain. And so to give you the context of how devastating this was for me, I had almost photographic memory. So I got through school,
Mm.
not by studying and working hard. I got through school the really lazy way. I was basically partying all through year 11 and year 12. I was night clubbing out, having a fantastic time. I could just read through something before the exam and just nail it. And I knew that, like I was so lazy. So when you suddenly then have no memory, I had to work really hard. So I would work on number plates, working on the first three numbers. And I would have to constantly throughout the day repeat them, trying to retrain my brain. And then the number plates would get longer, trying to remember those
Yeah,
number
wow.
to the point where, I mean, I knew I could never do acting again because at that time, because I thought I can't even remember a script. But as my memory got better, I would then train myself with scripts. And then once I got into my 30s, I really challenged myself to get back into acting again because I
Mm.
wanted to be able to remember like really long monologues. So tough Saturn lesson. But interesting, those links to neuroscience, because I was able to retrain my brain to get my memory
Absolutely.
back. I was up on
Yeah.
stage doing really long monologues in plays, which was just fantastic. But that's Saturn working really, 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 really hard to retrain my brain so that I felt comfortable, learning, remembering, and then communicating. So being
Yeah.
really comfortable communicating when you're worried that you're not going to remember anything that someone shared with you, right?
Yeah.
So tough. But I've really worked my Saturn, knowing I had to retrain my brain, knowing that I wasn't comfortable communicating because you have all these massive fears in the background, like huge fears, because you worry that you're not
Mm.
going to be able to remember anything. So I've done so many
Yep.
different things to, improve that aspect. And my example being is that when you work with your Saturn like that and you work with those Saturn life lessons, when you get a Saturn transit, it can be fantastic. Saturn wants you to
If
work hard.
if you know about it, if you know about it, right? It's
You,
like,
you know
but
about
and
it.
but and I was kind of giggling too because when you said something about Saturn beating us around the head, it's like, oh, I've had a few of those. I've had a few of those in my life. Do you
Yes.
think we're looking? Do you think we're looking for some deep truth, or do you think we're just looking for something that helps us make sense of our situation? I mean,
Well,
is there
yeah,
any
well,
difference?
both
Yeah.
really, both. And I think that's why I love astrology so much, because whenever, something's, massive has happened, I will look to my chart and I'll look and see what's going on. I'll be like, right, this is why this has happened, particularly when relationships end. And I think this is
Mm.
what really pushed me to get into professional astrology is, when a marriage ended and I couldn't understand why, because I didn't think it would end like that. And then I looked at my chart and I had Saturn, I think I was Saturn again,
Ah,
Saturn transiting
yeah.
my seventh house of relationships. And I was like, damn, I was so focused on other things. If I had known this was coming up in my chart, I would have
Mm.
known how to work with it. And this is what I advise people, particularly when they have Saturn transiting their seventh house. Relationships are going to be tough. It's a given. But if you know that that's happening in your chart, you can talk with your partner, you can talk with your family and say, this is what's happening. Things might be tough, but I love you more than anything. And I will do anything to work through these particular issues, if and when they arise. And
Yeah.
forearmed is forewarned is foreplanned, or whatever that saying
Yes,
is.
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes, I
yeah.
get it. And I just, that whole Saturn piece that you went through with the accident and the memory, I just want to jump in, and I know you know this, so that's why I'm jumping in, just to say what you're talking about with that rewiring is neuroplasticity, just in case
Mm-hmm.
anyone hasn't heard of it. And with the work that I used to do with my business, I made up a really quick 2-minute video that explains exactly what's happening when you rewire your brain like that. So I'll put that in the show notes of this one because I think people will
Yeah.
find it really interesting. And you add in the purposefulness because
Mm.
you know your chart. And the other thing I think I'm curious about is because I know that I've said to you many times, oh, that makes so much sense to me now. I've
Yeah.
been to you either just for business, did come to you for a breakup, but also just general life, so that I can amplify the goodness that's
Mm-hmm.
happening in my chart. But, when someone does make that comment to you, oh, this makes so much sense now. What do you think is actually happening for them at a deeper level? If we get back to that, we crave that
Mm.
certainty, we don't like
Mm.
uncertainty. What's happening, do you think?
Yeah, and it's a great question. From a neuroscience perspective, it's giving them some
Yeah,
answers. So, in terms of
yeah,
that, uncertainty, that fear that's coming up, it's that fear of the unknown, this fear of why is this happening to me? It's giving them
yeah.
some element of certainty. But from an astrology perspective, it's helping them to understand, that sense of purpose, that sense of why, that sense of, okay, this is why it's happened. But then we talk about how do we then transform it? How do we transform these energies? How do we get the best out of these energies? And what can we do differently next time? How can we leverage, the
Mm,
transits? And it again comes back to your chart, that recipe that's in your chart of this is how you create success. Let's tap into that. I'll give you an example. a reading I did this week with a particular person, they were in absolute panic mode because they thought a relationship was ending. And I could see in their chart that they had multiple planets hitting their eighth house, which is Scorpio energy, sex, death, other people's money.
Wow. Okay.
And so really deep, deep transformational lessons coming through for this person. And because they were in such, with such fight or flight mode and in such panic about this relationship ending, they just weren't hearing me. So not only did I know what was going on because I'd looked at their chart, but I'd tuned in, I'd spoken, energetically, like to their guides, my guides, the energies that I work with. And I knew the relationship was going to be fine. It's absolutely going to be fine. And so I'd be giving them advice. No, promise you it's going to be fine if you do X, Y, and Z. But they just weren't hearing me. So I was having to repeat myself multiple times, trying to really ground the energies, calm them down, because they were absolutely having, an amygdala hijack. They just couldn't hear me. So I was consciously doing energy work while I'm talking to them to try and really ground the energies so that they can hear me.
Yes.
So coming back to, your question, it's really hard for people to hear and understand and even comprehend what they can do unless we can just really ground them and calm them down first, because they're this in their head, constantly in their head, wanting that reassurance, wanting those answers. But even when I'm giving answers, they weren't being heard.
Look, absolutely. And we love neuroscience. It's always going to come into our conversations. And so I know I'm an EFT therapist. That's one of my long time trainings. And so this is where I learned a lot about, stress in the brain, etc. When I went on to study more about neuroscience, what I do know is that when our amygdala is firing off, our prefrontal cortex, which makes all the big decisions, helps us keep our emotions in check, all of that stuff goes into la la land. So what's happening with your person, as you know, when you're talking to them, is their executive function in their brain that can take it in is just in la la land. And so we have to find a strategy to calm, whether it be standing on the earth, going for a brisk walk, taking some deep breaths, whatever. And I wanted to jump in and say that because I think that's a really good thing for all of us to remember. So even me, if I don't know, someone might say that to me and it's like, oh, yes, that's a good reminder. And I wrote down, so when you were talking, I wrote down the word guides. Now I listened to that and I'm like, okay, let's get into a conversation about this. And I'm thinking, I just want to say for anyone who started listening to our wonderful podcast here, it's like, oh, that's a bit woo-woo, but then it's like, well, that's who we are. So buckle up, people, and enjoy it.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. But to give some context, right? To give some context, I know a lot of people think some of these things we're talking about are woo-woo, but this is where it's grounded. With astrology, it's about learning to read the signs rather than reacting. If I can read the signs and work with those energies and not react, I can stay in my flow. So with astrology, it is quite complex, right? It's a really, really complex thing to try and understand. But what it does is it gives you a language to explain the unknown. So all these things that might be happening that are, fear comes up for us because we don't know what the outcome is going to be. Will this relationship last? Will I get a job? Will this happen? Will that happen? It gives a language to all of that so we can understand this is what's happening. This is how I can work with the energies, but it's a formula, right? It's a formula that we work with. It's not a promise. So nothing's guaranteed. It's not a promise.
I like that.
It's how we can work with those energies. So it's about the timing, knowing how to work with the timing of the transits of what's coming up and understanding the patterns. Because when we understand our chart, we will then start to hone in on, oh, okay, I know
Mm.
when I have a transit hitting my natal Uranus or a transit hitting my Pluto, or if I have, Saturn on my moon. So I know when Saturn hits on my moon, I really feel low. And I know when it's coming up. So I know how to work with it. I feed my psychological needs. I make sure I do the things I need to do to elevate my energy. But I know it hits me. It's like it hits me in the guts. And so it's for each person to understand, what are the patterns in my chart? What are my sensitive points? But then what are my fabulous points? So when I have a transit like this, I feel in my element and I really need to leverage it.
I like that. And look, there's so much goodness in here. And you said something about language. I don't remember what it was, but just the way you describe things, Tanya, it makes me feel like there's this really good balance of, I might come to you looking for some answers, which looks like it's outside of myself, but you really take me back within, into my strength, into that
Mhm.
knowing. Um, but also the way you're talking, I'm curious on your take. Do you think that this whole idea of craving certainty somehow blocks our intuition a bit?
Oh, I love that
What do you
question.
think?
I love that
Yeah.
question. Yeah, I do. But I actually think it's a trust issue. So when we're craving that
Yeah.
certainty, this is where we're not trusting ourselves. And quite often, we're getting the guidance from our guides, from our higher self, whatever you want to call it. But
Yes.
we're getting that guidance, but we're not listening. We're not trusting it, and we're not backing
Mm,
ourselves. And this is where
mm,
we're seeking this certainty. We want to know from this reading, from this chart, is this going to happen? Well, nothing's certain. But what is certain is that if you trust your gut and you trust those instincts coming through, it's going to help put you on the right path. Doesn't mean it's always going to be smooth, but it's normally doing something that you really, really want to do. And you've got to trust that. And I think this is where those issues come in. People aren't trusting themselves, they're not backing themselves. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And it kind of almost plays perfectly into what we started talking about, which was last week's topic, manifestation.
Mm, mm,
If we can keep ourselves calm, so no wonder meditation is so well spoken of, as is breath work, looking
mm,
after ourselves from a health perspective. I mean, I could talk about so many things.
mm,
Um, but it's interesting because I know I wrote it down. I'm going to get back to my, that initial question, um, which is, does astrology actually offer certainty or
mhm.
just soothe our craving for it? It's kind of like it. I think you answered it does both, and I can really see that now.
Yeah, and I'm gonna ask a slightly different question here as well,
Okay.
because to I'm answering your question with a question.
Yeah.
That when these issues of certainty come up, it's about asking ourselves, um, am I using astrology, which is one tool, it could be something else, but am I
Mm,
using astrology, to avoid discomfort because
mm,
I'm not trusting or because I'm trying to force an outcome? Or am I using astrology so I can step into my power, step into my leadership, step into my absolute
okay.
potential and what's in my chart as my destiny? How am I using it?
I'll tell you what, you're going to be bloody disappointed if you're using it to force an outcome, right? Because
Yes.
it's not how it works. I've just got my cards out while you're talking to.
Yeah, because
Yes.
normally if you're
Yeah.
trying to force an outcome, you're trying to avoid some sort of discomfort. And the thing with
Mm.
astrology, right, is we get some really tough transits. We have to sit in that
Yes.
discomfort. And it's tough. It's really, really tough sometimes. But the more we sit in
Yeah.
it, we understand what we're needing to learn, what we're needing to do. The growth that comes from that is going to propel us forward and create the most amazing outcomes when we work with it. Like Chiron,
Yeah,
for instance.
absolutely.
Chiron,
Uh,
yeah, Chiron is one of the toughest. Chiron returns, my God, they're so tough.
yeah.
But at the heart of Chiron, right, we're not having that discomfort for no reason. There's a strong purpose to Chiron.
Mm.
When we
Okay.
work with Chiron, it's it's like it's even more magical than Jupiter. And this is what I say to people when I give them readings. If you work with these energies, it is quite phenomenal how opportunities will just seemingly come out of nowhere. There's not a
Mm,
lot known about Chiron. So this is all based
yeah.
on my 10, 15 years specific, anecdotal research on Chiron, is when people step into those energies, they work with those energies, amazing opportunities come out of it. But we have to sit in that discomfort first and understand that discomfort and understand how we need to use those energies, how we work with them. And then it's literally
Yeah.
just quite phenomenal.
I really love that. No matter what we're talking about, we always go back to self. And Tanya, can we put a link in of how people reach you for a reading? Because I know that you have, uh, uh, probably even a wait list. You're very
I
busy.
do.
But
There is the wait list. Yeah.
can we pop that in there? Just if people want to carry on the conversation with you, they can book a reading. And there's also Cosmic Queen, which we
Yeah.
can put the link to. Tanya talks about some really good energies that are happening out there. But yeah, I mean, we could talk for hours about this stuff, but we'd better wind up, otherwise we're going to run out of time today. But I just pulled a card. I just pulled a card which was called
Yeah.
Soulcraft, and it's I'm only going to read the heading that's in this wonderful book, and it says, "Life happens from you, not to you."
Nice. Nice. Well, I pulled some cards at the start, not knowing what the cards were going to relate to, because not knowing what we were going to talk about. But I wanted to pull
Yeah,
some cards that was going to really assist with the themes and, what we were talking about. And interestingly, the first card that came up is that self-esteem card, which
beautiful,
really
beautiful.
feeds into that, if we're not trusting and we're wanting certainty, that's all about our self-esteem. But then look at
Yeah,
this one. It's the Venus
mm,
card, and it's about business.
yeah,
So this is
yeah.
about us creating the realities we want to create, again, when we work with astrology. And then the third card is the family card, Holy Spirit. And so I'm now
Mm.
getting, after our conversation, this comes back to the point I made about trusting that guidance that comes through, because that guidance from our guides, our higher self, is pushing us towards the outcomes that they want us to
Absolutely.
create.
And
Yeah.
notice it, people. Notice what you notice. When you want to look for these things, you will find them. And I'm gonna end it there, Tanya, because I think this is going to lead into another conversation. I have a feeling.
Yes.
But thank you so much. Thank you so much. I look forward to the next one, and we will absolutely make sure that people can follow you.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Brenda. Thank you, everyone.
Yay. All
Talk
right. See ya.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.